Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and as promised, this is my late review of Vampyr, or Vampyr, however you want to say it, I don't care. You may pronounce it how you like. So that being said, I played it on the PS4, it's also available on the Xbox One. Now firstly, I will say, I really thought the story was interesting and well done. I like the main character, I like most of the characters that you run into throughout the game. So the story goes, you are Jonathan Reed, and you are basically bitten by a vampire. You die and come back as a vampire, and things get really interesting from there. Starting with the first person you run into as a vampire with the thirst now just taking over you is your dear sister, and well, that's the first person you drink from and kill. And it's really interesting because they take some really dark and interesting turns with what he does after that point, but he also does continue to live. He does try to find out what's going on, who he is, what he is. And fortunately for Jonathan, he meets a human, he meets another vampire who are willing to help him. But fortunately for him, he's also a well-known doctor, so he's able to kind of hide in plain sight. That being said, there's so much more going on in the world than just that, and he gets wrapped up in it. And I really enjoyed it because it did have just the right amount of intrigue, and it has very good storytelling. The dialogue is, for the most part, very good. Also, I want to say, I really dug when this is taking place because it takes place during the Spanish flu epidemic, and I've always thought the Spanish flu epidemic was really fascinating. As for the audio is very good in this game. I like the music. I do wish there was more music. Some of it gets a little repetitive, but it's not that it sounds bad by any stretch. All the sound effects are very well done when you're using your vampire powers, when you're in combat, the enemies, what they say, what they do. It's all well done. Lastly, the voiceover work is, just like anything else in this game, it's good. It's very well done. Don't Nod put the effort in to make sure this doesn't sound horrible. They use a bit of Yoldi English, a bit of modern English. It's a good hybridization so that it's not too distant feeling, but it's still well done and feels period correct. So let's get into the gameplay, and I'm going to address this one right away. I thought it was a very fascinating way of doing this. The difficulty of the game is decided on how you play. This is one of those games where you can very much do good or evil. You can be the vampire that just goes around and drains all the citizens, which firstly, there are citizens and then there are enemies. There's a big difference. Citizens are just people who are actual characters, and you can lure them away and drain them of blood. And if you've taken good care of them, basically like cattle, you've taken good care of them, you've fed them, you've kept them healthy, and then you drained their blood, you get a lot of experience from doing that. Admittedly, I didn't do that. I like to play games like this where you can go good or evil. One playthrough is good, one playthrough is evil. So I unfortunately chose the hard method of being the kind of good guy, I guess, and not going around and draining every human I can. Also, I want to comment on the map. The map is not huge. If you see it, you'll be like, oh, that's not that big. And that's true. It's not that big. And I will say that's not entirely a detractor. The only thing that is a detractor is that in this open world, there is no fast travel. Because while the map isn't huge, it's just big enough that running from one end to the other is obnoxious. A little obnoxious, not super obnoxious. This game does some things that we've seen in other RPGs where it has like the conversation wheel. It's not necessarily good or evil, it is just varying degrees of humanity, I would say. You can be generous, you can be kind of mockery, etc. Things like that, but you will get different responses, and you can even close down routes of discussion with people by choosing the wrong thing. As I just stated, it's very much an RPG. You gain experience, you level up by sleeping, you craft items, etc., etc. But it is an action RPG, so there's a lot of combat, and it's a much more action-based combat, but I will say this about it, Don't Nod still does not have combat on lockdown. I don't think they've ever done a purely trash job of combat in a game, but it's also not the greatest combat system I've ever seen in a game. None of their games that have had combat have been astounding for the combat. But honestly, I come to Don't Nod games because I enjoy the stories they tell. As for the controls, I will say they work well. The only thing that holds me back from saying very well would be the lock-on system. It doesn't necessarily lock on to who you want it to lock on. And I guess that really isn't so much controls, but it does get annoying and you are trying to lock on to somebody utilizing the controls, specifically aiming at them, and it doesn't always lock on to who you want it to. Lastly, the graphics. Now this is kind of a tough one for me because it's a good looking game in its own right, but it's not as good looking as I would like it to be. I feel like it was an art style, but I feel like they were also trying to be very realistic looking, but all at once not realistic looking. It's hard to say. I enjoyed the way it looked. I enjoyed the world they built visually. I enjoyed their character design. So I'm not gonna just shit all over the visuals of this game. So at the end of this, I'm just gonna say there were a few weird small glitches. I had one sizable crash, but I didn't really lose much, which is nice. This game autosaves frequently. I will also say as a bonus, because I love this in games and hate it when games don't do it, you can pause at any time. I love that. I despise games that don't do it. It pisses me off. But my overall on this game is I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun playing it. I want to replay it so that I can play through as like the evil blood-sucking monstrosity of a vampire. So I would definitely recommend it. If you're looking for an action RPG, I think this is a good one. It hits a nice balance of side quests, but not a ton of like overly grindy nature. It's also not obscenely huge, but it's still large, so I would recommend it. I had a lot of fun playing this game. I enjoyed it a lot. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me if you ever played the Legacy of Kain games? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.